All right. Well, welcome once again to ACLU on the Hill. Marina Lowe, thanks for being here. We're actually on the Hill today.
That's right.
And there's a lot going on. This is the end of the second week of the legislative session. There's a bill that's been getting a lot of attention recently. That would be HB 243, the Warning Labels Amendment Bill from Representative Brammer. You've done some media interviews on that, and we've done some research on it. What can you tell us about that bill?
Yeah, I like to think about this as the don't watch the Super Bowl halftime show bill. What this bill purports to do is require that there be a label on content which is considered material harmful to minors. It's being run by Representative Brady Brammer, and we have raised to him real concerns with this legislation in the way that it might impact and infringe upon people's First Amendment rights.
Gotcha. And there's actually some case law that the ACLU pursued over a decade ago.
That's right. The ACLU filed a piece of litigation in response to legislation passed in 2005, not exactly the same subject that is being legislated here, but something similar and some similar points. That case was ultimately settled in 2012 after years of litigation.
And just to let our viewers know, we're talking about the First Amendment here, right? This is about freedom of speech. This is about the ability to see or review speech that is protected for adults. It's out there, and this is a bill that would potentially chill people's access to that type of material. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to note, a lot of the talk in the media has been about this being an anti-porn or anti-obscenity bill. It's actually targeting what's called material harmful to minors, and by its very definition, that means that the same material is perhaps totally acceptable for adults. And has, of course, First Amendment protection. And so, when we step into that arena and decide to either limit or put restrictions, including labeling, on that type of speech, we need to tread really carefully to make sure that we aren't infringing upon the Constitution.
Now, one thing I've read is that Representative Brammer has said that this bill mimics Proposition 65 in California, which many people are familiar with. If you ever traveled there, there's labels on lots of different materials, even on buildings, saying that there's carcinogenous materials or chemicals within that building. It's like a warning label. He's saying that this is the same sort of public health information that Utah would be providing on this adult content. Do you see that as apples to apples, or is there a little bit more of a gap there?
Yeah, I mean, we don't see those as entirely analogous. The idea that exposure to chemicals is the same as exposure to material which may indeed have First Amendment protection because of its artistic or other value. Those are not at all the same thing. Representative Brammer has indicated he's willing to work with us on the language, and so we'll just have to stay tuned and see how this bill evolves.
Okay, and that's HB 243, something we'll be following for the next couple of weeks. Let's move on to another bill, one that we've been working on for quite a while. We knew this was coming up this year. That's HB 231, the Genetic Information Amendments from Representative Craig Hall.
Yeah.
What does that bill look like? The text is out this week.
That's right. Yeah, this is an exciting area of legislation. It's also one that's not without controversy. And the idea really is to put some restrictions and regulations around the use of DNA by law enforcement. We've seen this rise in the private sector of companies like 23andMe and Ancestry.com. People are regularly spitting into tubes these days to find out about their ancestry, to find out about their health conditions. And they're doing so for those particular reasons, and we want to be very careful about the idea that we might now somehow be allowing law enforcement to have access to this material, which is incredibly sensitive and private. Material that can reveal all sorts of things about who we are, about our health conditions, our predispositions, and about our connections to other family members.
That's right, because this isn't just like a fingerprint where everyone has a unique bit of DNA. I mean, people's DNA is unique, but it also shares a lot of characteristics with close relatives. So even if your close relative goes into Ancestry.com, spits in a tube, and gets in that registry, your information could be gleaned from that. Is that right?
That's right. Without you ever having consented to it being in there, without you having ever agreed to participate. And now all of a sudden there's the possibility that law enforcement could nonetheless get your information as well.
Gotcha. No, that bill was going to be heard on Friday at the legislature. Has that been pushed back a little bit?
Yes, it's looking more like next week.
Okay. All right. Let's look at one more piece of legislation. It actually isn't numbered yet. We don't know what the text is, and that involves body cameras used by law enforcement here in Utah. That's been a trend over the past couple of years of more and more police agencies using body cameras. Civil liberties people like it because it gives us a view of what happens. Law enforcement also, that can help protect them because it is an unbiased view of what's happening. It's just a video. What are you looking at in terms of supposedly unbiased? What are we looking at in terms of tweaking the way body camera legislation would move forward?
Yeah, so just by way of background, we worked with some other partners to pass body camera legislation several years ago here in Utah. Now that legislation did not require that every law enforcement agency use body cameras, but did state that if an agency were to have body cameras and to use them, then they would need to have a policy which met certain minimum standards that were put into statute. One of the things that was left out of that statute several years ago was some sort of consequence when there should be footage, when an officer is under an obligation or a duty to record, and for whatever reason that footage is not available to the defendant in their criminal trial. And so what this legislation is aiming to do is to look at that situation and try and resolve it in a way that provides some fairness in the judicial process to the defendant who would otherwise be entitled to evidence in his or her favor.
So we're really looking at legislation to what happens when there is no body camera footage.
Right.
When an officer is wearing one, but for some reason it's not turned on, even though by protocol it should be.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. When do you think this bill would come out?
You know, we're hoping in the next few days, but it's anybody's guess. It appears that things are moving slowly out of legislative research this year, and so we shall see.
So yeah, there's apparently 1,000 bills that have been sort of filed, but only a couple hundred that have been numbered right now, right?
That's right. And as you know, we're already approaching the end of week 2, and there's only 5 more to go.
Wow, 7-week session, and we're 2/7 of the way through. Okay. Well, thank you, Marina, for talking to us about some of your work here on the Hill. And check in next week. Well, we'll see if what's happened with some of these bills we've discussed today.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.